Hey everyone, my name is Aparna. I'm a product manager at Google. I have Roy and Ian with me. We are from the knowledge team at Google. So this is the first time our team is kind of doing these developer sessions at I/O around structured data and knowledge. So we hope you like it and let us know what you think for the next year. So our talk today is about bringing relevant information from the inbox to the search box and new experiences like Google Now. How many of you use Google Now or tried it? Okay, all right. And we're going to talk about how, both as users, you can see some of the new features we are building and kinds of problems that we're trying to solve, but also from the developer angle. Like I said, we'll start with the user experience. We'll give you a sense of the user problems we're trying to solve, features we're building, maybe throw in a few demos, and then switch gears and say, OK, how can you, as developers, be part of this experience? How many of you attended the keynote yesterday morning? How many of you saw the search, the conversational search? Okay. How many of you thought it was not bad? Really good? OK. So you saw Amit and Johanna kind of show you, give you a glimpse of the future of search and where we are going. And in this talk, I'll go a little bit deeper and show you some of these examples of how we are pushing the edge in terms of saying, look, the future of search is being a conversational and an assistant. So I'm going to, for the next few moments, I'm going to kind of treat this half of the room as my user half, and this half as my developer half. So okay, quick question to the user half, right? How many of you kind of like look for information in your emails, like often? And question for the developer half, do you send information to your users, important information in emails, like confirmation, notifications, stuff that you want them to remember? Yeah. So here's the problem. You guys are sending information to these guys, but then what's happening is this. So is the person next to you, so is that guy behind you, and that woman at the back, she's sending email too, and before you know it, these guys are getting flooded with all of these emails, but important information, but it's really impossible for you to find that one single nugget, one single answer, one single piece of information that you need at the time you need it, right? And to make it really concrete, let me give you a specific personal example, right? So this morning I woke up, I had one simple question. What hotel am I staying at? So you see I have a flight coming up tomorrow morning, I have an early morning flight, and I have this talk, and I have another event this evening. I figured I should just stay the night in the city. So I wanted to mention my hotel information to my husband, and it took me 5 steps just to get to that answer. So first step, I had to, all right, if you can't see this here, but I'll talk to you through it. The first step is I had to actually swipe past all these goddamn apps on my phone and then open Gmail, right? The second step, I had to map the natural question that popped up in my head. I had to say, what hotel am I staying at? And then turn this into this robotic set of keywords that I thought Google could understand. So I had to say, OK, maybe I should say hotel and the provider that actually sent me that email. That's the second step. And then third step, I basically had to say, well, now I have to make sure that I peck at my keyboard and type these queries on a tiny device, and make sure that I'm not doing any typos because it's a pain to type it again. Fourth step, then I see a bunch of these email results. They all look the same, and I have to make a guess and say maybe one of these emails has an answer. And then comes to the final step and say, OK, I click open the email, wade past all the information, all the words that I don't quite need, and just to get that one single answer, right, which says, oh, it's the Marriott next door, right? 5 steps just to get to that answer. Now, we think it should be much easier. And those of you who saw the keynote know that one of the ways that we want to make it easier is say, you ask a question. In fact, you speak your mind to the phone, and we get you the answer, one single step, right? Because by the time I'm done with these 5 steps this morning, my husband was on the 5th page of Hacker News. I wanted to be in one single shot. Now, so we said, OK, this morning I came in and said, team, we must fix this. And in the last few hours, we've basically solved everything. Kidding, of course. The reason this is a hard problem is not because, if you think about it, going from question to an answer in one step requires us to be solving really hard problems, right? The first hard problem, from the technical side, first hard problem we'll have to solve is speech recognition, right? Understanding what you're saying to the phone. The second hard problem we have to solve is understanding natural language. It's hard enough to understand speech, then we have to add natural language. And then the third hard problem we have to solve is semantic understanding, or understanding structure enough to say, okay, like when you say, what hotel am I staying at, we mean that there's a hotel, there's a name to the hotel, and there's an address, and there's a phone number, and so on, very structured information. These are hard problems, but I'd much rather like Google solve these hard problems than me as a user, right? Like I said, speech, natural language, structured data understanding. Now, why is it an important problem to solve? Oops. If you think about it, during the course of a day, right, typical day, and not a day that you're at Google I/O, a typical day, you have lots of questions, and you want fast answers. Imagine if each of these questions took several steps. You'd be spending a lot of time in just like fuzzing around with the data that you have. Notice that some of these questions, and you see some of these questions here, some of these questions are coming from our knowledge graph, right? They can be answered from the knowledge graph that we're building. And if you attended some of the structured data talks earlier today, you'll know that we're investing in this, building out this knowledge graph, understanding things, understanding places, and so on, 500 million entities and growing. But then not all answers come from that, right? So some of these answers do come from your own information, let's say your emails or your calendar. And we want to be able to help you go from the question to answer in one step for those answers as well. So in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, when the context resides, in fact, we actually shouldn't even have to wait for you to ask that question, right? You have a special order that you're waiting for, you just ordered it, and that's shipped. You should just be able to say, look, the package that you're waiting for has shipped, and this is Google Now for those of you who are trying out. Let me actually switch gears to a demo so we can actually show some of these in action. I'm going to first dare the Wi-Fi gods here and see if we can pull it off, the voice search on a phone. So as I mentioned earlier, I have this flight coming up tomorrow morning, and I have a lunch meeting with a client, and I just don't want to be late to it. So I can say something like, when is my restaurant reservation?
You have a reservation for Angelini Osteria, 1200 hours, paying tomorrow.
So I can see that, I see the restaurant reservation right away. I don't have to fuzz with my phone. The answer comes up right away. And then I say, OK, so it's at 12 o'clock. It's not too bad. But then wait, when does my flight get there? I can ask something like, when does my flight land?
Virgin America Flight 1930 from SFO to LAX arrives at 9:03 a.m. tomorrow.
I can hear the answer. I can also see the answer right away, and then say, OK, look, unless I'm paranoid, I have plenty of time to get to the restaurant. But I am paranoid, so I'm going to wonder, wait, like, is there enough, is there traffic between the airport to the restaurant? So I can now say something like, how far is it from LAX to Angelini Osteria?
The drive from Los Angeles International Airport to Angelini Osteria is 12.6 miles.
So I can see it's 12.6 miles, it's 30 minutes, even in peak LA traffic, I still have plenty of time. A couple of things I want to highlight here in terms of what's happening behind the scenes, right? The reason why from this question I could just get to the answers in one step is that Google's able to understand when I say my flight or my hotel, it's able to understand based on the context that, hey, you have a flight coming up, you have a hotel reservation, and use that information to get the answer. The second thing worth noting here is that each of these responses that Google's giving back is very structured, right? So when you have the restaurant reservation, it's actually telling you the most important things that you'd want to know. It's like what time it is, where it is, and how far, and even get directions to get there. Let's try a couple more things. What's on my schedule this weekend?
You have a ticket for Ironman 3 at 9:30 p.m. tomorrow.
All right, so I have a movie. I can see that I have a movie that my husband's taking me tonight to make up for all the long hours at work making these demos work. And I can also see, again, to kind of reinforce the point, right? So as soon as, when I ask this question, what I want to know are the most obvious pieces of information that I need as a user. If I have a movie coming up, I want to know the most obvious things, which is what time it is, where it is, and even directions to get there. And we're able to actually present that structured information. I can also see that there's another event, which is just my usual regular yoga class on Saturday. It's coming from my calendar event. I can also say, oh, yeah, I have this brunch with my friends. Again, like where and when. And I can say, oh, yeah, there is this event invitation that I have for somebody's birthday at my neighbor's. I can also, this is a multi-screen experience. I just showed you on the phone as a speaker. I can speak these questions and get an answer on the phone, because usually that's where you are on the go, you want the questions answered. But I could just as well type it in, or even speak on the laptop or a desktop here. In fact, why don't I actually switch gears and show you a couple examples, just so you know this is available anywhere on Google. So here I have my laptop. I'm signed in. I could say something like, I could just type in, right? And I see the same answer. Because I typed in, I just see the answer as a result. Notice that I actually said a slightly different thing. I said, when does my flight leave versus when does my flight land? And Google's able to understand that. I could also, again, speak this on my laptop. I could basically say, when does my flight leave? Let me try that again. OK, Google, when does my flight leave?
Virgin America Flight 1930 from SFO to LAX leaves at 8 a.m. tomorrow.
And so you notice that I can basically speak to Google on the laptop or on the phone. I can also type it in. Let me show you another example. I can basically say something like, my reservations. And so right away you see, oh, I have a hotel reservation coming up, the very one that I was talking about earlier. And again, I see all the information that I need to be able to act on that information. I have the restaurant reservation coming up. And I can type this in. And again, Google understands when I say my. What do I mean when I say my reservations or my hotel and so on. Let's switch gears. So if you're a developer, around this time, you're thinking maybe a couple things. One, as a user, how can I get to play with these new features? And these are opt-in experiences that we're actually building, and we're building features on top of it. So at the end of the talk, I'm going to give you instructions on how to get in on the field trial as a user, on the how do I actually ask Google for information about myself, about my own world. Those of you who haven't tried Google now, you can actually go to the Play Store and download it and see some of these contextual cards show up as well, so that you don't even have to search for these. If on the day of the stay, you should just get the hotel information. But as a developer, you're wondering the other thing, which is, wait, this is new. If this is the new Google, how can I be part of this experience? And where do you fit in here? And here's the question that's the most obvious one, which is, you have all this unstructured pieces of information. And we need to be able to turn these into really structured answers. And how does that happen? And how do developers be part of it? And this is where email markups come in. And the idea is very simple, right? So for each of these use cases, let's say the flight or the hotel or the events, we're saying, OK, look, for the user, these are the 5 or 6 or 10 pieces of information that are really important. So let's define a schema, a vocabulary, for each of these use cases, and say, OK, for a flight, we should be able to define these particular fields. And you as a developer can simply mark up the emails that you already send your users and say, this particular piece of information is a passenger name. This particular thing is a reservation number, and so on. So for example, if you have the flight, for some reason there's the UI. OK, it's taking a delay. For a flight, for example, right, as a user, I might type in, when is my next flight? And I want to see the most basic pieces of information. The most obvious thing I just want to know is which airlines am I flying on and what flight number it is. Some of the other pieces of information I might want is what time it is departing, so I'm not late, where it is departing from, which airport. And the same thing on the landing side, what airport is it landing at and what time it's landing at. So on the right-hand side here, so left-hand side is what the user sees. And on the right-hand side, what you see here is a very simple data model, a schema that says, look, these are the pieces of information that you want your users to see. So you can define and you can basically mark up your email along these pieces of the schema. So you have reservation number, you have the flight number, you have the airline's name, departure time, arrival time, and so on. Really simple. But this is for a flights use case, right? For a different type of use case, like an event, for example. It'll take some time to load. Yeah. So let's say you have an event. Again, the user comes into Google. They can say, when's the Giants game? And we know, for example, that they have a Giants game coming up, and we can show this structured answer here, right? And if you see that answer, again, the most important pieces of information, what time it is and where it is. That's it. So on the right-hand side, you again have the most basic pieces of information that you, as a developer, can simply mark up against the information you send. So it's like, when does it start, and what's the name, and where is it? This is for an events use case. Another one would be a hotel, which we'll go into detail with Roy's hands-on demo here. Loading. So it's another one can be a restaurant reservation, where again, like the basic pieces of information, again, we start with the user experience and say, what are the pieces of information you as a user would want? And then work backwards and say, what should be the fields in the schema that you as a developer should add? Now, these are just an initial subset of use cases that we started out with, right? Because we said, OK, we want to start helping users, and the most obvious pain point we saw was travel, right? Instead of fuzzing around with the phone, we really wanted to say, OK, through Google Now and through these answers, we want to start helping the users. But this is not the comprehensive set here. And I think this is one thing where your inputs, your creativity, your ideas would be really useful, and we're hoping that we can actually set aside some time today to discuss those, which is what would be your example of a use case, right? What are some things that you share information, that you send information to users, and you don't want it lost in the mix, gathering dust in the inbox? And how can we pick those examples, define the schema, define the vocabulary for those examples, and then start building new features? So these are some really early partners that we've been working with in terms of implementing markups, where they're able to go from unstructured information that they send their users today to these structured answers and Google Now cards in one single step, right? Once they mark up this email, and we even have tools that can help with the markup. And once they're able to do the markup, they're done. And what happens is the rest of the hard work, right, they're leaving to Google, bringing up this information at the right time, doing speech recognition, doing natural language understanding, that can be pretty much like, the grunt work there can be dealt with by Google. And all you have to do as a developer is basically take the information you send already and mark it up with these basic pieces of information, and you're done. Now I'm going to ask Roy to actually walk you through a couple of these examples, just so you get a sense of how to get started on these as a developer. Roy?
Thanks, Aparna. So let's say that you're an online travel agency, and you would like to get reservation information available to users through Google Now or through Answer in search. So let's walk through the process that Booking.com, an early adopter of our platform, would have to go through if they did this markup today. So earlier this morning, in the Google Tools for Structured Data, we introduced a really new cool tool called Structured Data Markup Helper, courtesy of these two gentlemen in the first row. So I will use this tool to walk you through how Booking.com would mark up their email. So this is how the tool looks like. And as you can see, as Aparna mentioned, we support 4 different verticals: event reservation, flight reservation, lodging reservation, and restaurant reservation. Since Booking.com sends hotel confirmation emails, I'm going to click on the lodging reservation. And so the input for this tool is basically the raw HTML of the email. Now, I already prepared the raw HTML of just a random, regular Booking.com hotel reservation email. I'll paste it in this box and click on Start Tagging. It'll take a few seconds to load. A little more than a few seconds. Let's just open another page.
Blame it on the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
It's going, right?
It's going? There it is. Okay. Let's do it quickly once again. Okay, so I'll just, there you go. Okay, don't go away, please bear with me.
Oh, do you want to hardwire it?
Yeah,
Just to the Wi-Fi?
that should be a good idea.
Oh, it's already there. Oh, there you go.
There you go. Okay. So on the left-hand side, you can see what the users see when they go to their Gmail client. It's just the email. And on the right-hand side, you see the list of all the fields that we support for markup. Now, our UI requires some of the fields, and you can see that the tool calls these out. There are 8 or 9 required fields here. Let me quickly walk you through the process of marking up, and I'll show you how quickly it is, or how easy it is. We'll start with the reservation number. That's the first one. I'll just click on the reservation number, choose the right field, and once I click, you can see that the value is updated on the right-hand side. Let's quickly walk through the rest of the fields. A lodging name would be San Francisco Marriott. Street address.
Yeah, can you?
Yeah, it's a good idea. How is that? Okay. Okay, the city would be San Francisco. State, California. Country. And postal code. Under name, that would be me. And last is check-in time. That's it. So I'll just want to review these to make sure that I didn't forget any of the fields, and looks like I didn't. I'll click on Create HTML. And what you see here are the few lines that you'll have to add to the top of your email, and that's it. Basically, your markup is done. It's as simple as that. I think it's a good point. It's a good time to mention that we support 2 kinds of formats. The traditional HTML we have been supporting since we introduced rich snippets. And also, we decided to support another format, JSON-LD, which some people feel that it's easier to understand, easier to implement, and to read. If you do want to use JSON-LD, that's the default here. And if you want to use microdata, HTML, you just have to choose it. And what you see here on the right-hand side is just the raw HTML with these few lines of HTML markup added to the raw email. There it is. Okay. So just to recap, it's super easy to implement this. The tool that I just showed you, the markup helper, is already available in our developer website. And Ain's team also created a validation tool. Once you start to play with the markup, you can copy the markup that you created, paste it into the validation tool that's also in our developer website, and see if you actually marked up right. And if you didn't, it will tell you what you did wrong, so you can fix it. That's really easy, literally less than 1 day of work for one engineer, and this markup is done. I hope you found it useful. Thank you, and I'll hand it over to Aparna.
So this is the link that Roy was talking about. I want to kind of step back and recap what you just saw. because I think this is a big shift for where search is going, and it's worth kind of thinking about what this means for both for you as users as well as developers. As users, I think the way to think about this is the future of search is actually going from questions to answers in one step. And there's probably behind the scenes, there's a lot going on, but the main point is you shouldn't have to worry about it as users. Like, let Google do the hard work, and you should get your answers. And these answers, and the answers that we focused on in this session, for sure are for answers about your own world, your own information, but they're answers from the rest of the world, from the knowledge graph that figure into. I think in the same way, as developers, what we want to try and do is, how can you actually make sure that the information that you're sending these users today, it's lying in their inboxes, how can we make sure that we bring up the relevant information into the search box and into Google Now? Again, in one step, right? So you should leave the hard work, the rest of the hard work to Google, but actually if you can just do the markup on the emails that you already send users, you're basically good to go. I'll leave you with two concrete next steps. One, as users, if you haven't tried either Google Now or the search field trial, we have an opt-in experience where you'll start being able, once you opt into this experience at this short link here, g.co/search trial, you will be able to basically start playing with this and experimenting with features that I just demoed, right? You should be able to say, when is my flight? What's my schedule? Show me emails from my friend, right? So examples like that. And then the second thing, as a developer, one concrete next step is we have actually an entire developer's website dedicated to going through all of this in detail, all the tools and the documentation on the schema that we've developed for these initial use cases. But also, we're actually starting a small pilot program to sign up partners. Some of these partners are on board, as you saw. But definitely sign up to be part of the program and work together with us so that you can see how to start surfacing in Google Now and search. Thank you. So I think we have maybe time for Q&A if you want to raise any questions. Otherwise, we're also back in the sandbox area where knowledge is, and you can come talk to us about any of these questions in detail. And if there's anything you know from this talk, we love answering questions.
Hi, I wonder if you can comment on the roadmap for new schemas and whether there's a schedule of coming schemas.
Sorry, can you say that again?
I wonder if you could comment on the roadmap for schemas. Right now I saw, I think, 4 examples. I think yesterday we saw some examples of media and music.
Yep.
Is there a roadmap for schemas? Is there a schedule? Is there, if you could comment on the plans of the future?
Yeah, and I think, direction. So the question was, yesterday in the keynote, you saw some of these other examples of your own information being very easy, right? Like one of the specific demos we saw was, show me my pictures from New York last year. And instead of, again, like fuzzing through the albums and albums, we are just basically doing the hard work and saying, look, here you go. And today you saw these other kinds of examples, and the question was, is there a roadmap? What's the bigger picture here? The way we think about this problem, again, is starting with the user and saying, what are the typical daily information needs that a user has? Now, it turns out we actually did a bunch of user studies around this. We found that some of these user needs are about the real world. They say basically, how's the traffic to this place, or what's the GDP of that country, or is the restaurant open? But many of these questions, what we found from our user studies, are about their own information. And especially as that information keeps growing, their need to find that information grows. So some of this information is photos, is media. Other pieces of information are in their emails, typically events and other travel-related questions. There are other verticals or use cases that we've identified, and we're starting to work on them. And the reason we've actually done a field trial of these is to say, okay, let's put it in front of our users for the use cases that we can start unlocking and see how the reaction is. How do people actually use this? And how do people actually find this information useful? So over the next few months and till the end of the year, we're going to start expanding these use cases. Thanks.
Hi. So you've showed how we can register information that's later recalled from Google Now or through the Google search tools. Are there other interfaces? Are there programmatic interfaces to allow developers to be able to pull up that information that maybe was registered by other applications?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question, as I understand, is, look, this is great. Like one obvious surface is through the search tools in Google Now, but are there other ways, APIs for developers to actually surface that information? I think the way to think about this is, again, like componentizing these pieces of information. For example, once Chrome gets the microphone, the icon, then through the Chrome APIs, you should basically be able to say your own website should get you the capability to do voice, right? And again, like you should rely on Google to do the hard work in terms of actually having those, having the underlying technology, but then you should just worry about the responses that you're going to generate for the user. So the way I think about the problem is more, where do users, what's the surface, most obvious surface where users are actually looking for this information? Start there, help them there, and then figure out if there are other places that we can help them.
Thanks.
So I was interested in the schema helper. You showed only 4 helpers that were specifically tied to events and reservations. Are there any plans of adding more such helpers, or
yes,
in the
and
near
do you
future?
have any ideas on what kinds of
Okay,
other
for example,
use cases?
products. If you sell products, that you could send like the schema for a product on the email.
Yeah, so the question for those of you is, in the helper tool you saw, we had a few use cases, right? Events, hotels, flights, restaurants. And the question was, well, why don't we have helpers for other use cases? And I think this is exactly the kind of back and forth conversation we'd love to have with the developer community, which is what are the other use cases? Products would be a really good one, where there's a purchase orders, for example.
Okay,
right?
so it will work as a conversation. We ask and you develop, or will we have APIs to build our own helpers and maybe add them to the tool?
In the beginning, and Justin, feel free to jump in here.
Yeah, and the one comment we saw before,
Yep.
sort of email-oriented schemas, there's another tab, markup helper, there are 8 additional schemas that are more website-oriented, so you create events, products, features, things like that, are supported in another tab. So we don't have current plans to sort of open up an open schema process for the tool, because it's actually a bit challenging, but it is a nice thought.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tim. Question, how does it define what information is shown on the main part of the search and which one is shown on the right side? So for example, if I look for flight information, it currently displays in the main search area, and some information is shown on the right. And related to that is, what if you have multiple matching results? So I have multiple flights in different sites, or any other, it could be products or whatever. How's that being handled?
Yeah, so two parts to your question. Right? One is, when do we basically figure out, how do we figure out, and what's the logic in terms of when we bring up the information front and center versus when we think it's auxiliary. And what you're referring to is, in fact, in the field trial, for certain queries or certain questions, we think there is a very strong explicit intent. For example, if you say, when does my flight land? I mean, there's no question that you're asking about the flight. But if you said Virgin America, because you wanted to basically look up the customer service number, right? We don't want to get in the way. Again, like, this is Google, this is search. We definitely don't want to be getting in the way between your question and answer, and we want to be doubly sure that we understood the intent of your question. So if your question is, when is my flight? Then we say, okay, obviously you're looking for the flight, so let's give you that answer and get out of the way. But if your question starts with Virgin America, or Virgin America customer service number, then we think that if this information is helpful, then we basically give you in the auxiliary in the right-hand side. But in general, we try to actually get it closer and closer to your explicit intent as much as possible. And this is where the natural language helps, because once you're expressing questions or queries in natural language, there's very little doubt what you mean. So for example, if you wanted to know the customer service number, if you're able to say this to Google, you would, right? If you're able to say to Google, what's the customer service number of Virgin America? You would. And that's hard. I mean, we'll take some early steps, but the natural language technology is not fully there yet. And the other thing you mentioned was around how do we make sure that the information is represented?
No, I mean, I could have more than one match, right? So
right,
one
so
example is,
multiple.
for example, the data about contacts you're showing on the right side now.
Yeah.
What if you have multiple matches or multiple applications that provide the same information?
Yeah, and we love that use case because it actually shows up. It shows up kind of our. So in fact, in the demo, if you saw, I typed in my reservations, and I had a hotel reservation, I had a restaurant reservation, but we showed both of those because you said my reservations, or if you said my flights and you're a busy bee and you have like 5 flights coming up in the next month, we basically want to give you all the information you need. And in fact, I can show you how each of these pieces of information you can expand and say, and I can show you the link later, but expand the information in place so that you can see all the relevant information about a flight and go on to the next one and so on. So the way we basically figure out is based on the query that you have. If you said my flight tomorrow, it'll give you just that. But if you said my flights next month, then we understand that and say, here, all of it.
All right, thanks.
Sorry, just another quick one. So you mentioned about multiple events around something. What about events that change information? My reservation changes, things like that. Yeah. How do I, as a developer, go back and update it so I'm not having outdated information shown to users?
Yeah, and that's a really good point because I think in all of these use cases where reservations or events, it's and that's precisely why markup is helpful, right? So once you actually give the email and you're able to like mark up the updated email that you send the users, we are able to like figure it out and say, okay, this is obviously the latest information here.
So if you think about it, our APIs is actually the emails that you're sending out, right? If you want to update the reservation, just send an email and we will do all the heavy lifting. We will understand that this is actually the previous reservation if you provide the confirmation number, and then we will be able to update the card in Search and in Google Now.
Okay,
So really the emails are your APIs.
So the assumption is that that should be taken care of as long as we have sent some sort of a follow-up tied to some kind of key.
Exactly, and you mark up. You'll have to mark up so that we can understand and dedupe.
Thank you.
So this is maybe a different kind of use case. And at one point, Google, I think, had a tool that would index all the information on my computer. Because you can't remember all the stuff that's in there. And I don't know whether that tool even still exists. But I wind up keeping things in my inbox as a reminder of things I need to do. Or I even send myself emails just to remind me of something to do, or to keep track of a small piece of information that otherwise would be lost. Because at least if it's in my Gmail, I can search on it. But for instance, I can't find that out if I'm away from home and I just have my phone. But have you ever thought about that aspect of this?
Yeah, and I think, so there are two parts to what you're asking, and the question or the topic that you brought up is, my email, my inbox has a lot of information. Some of it is very actionable in terms of, the information that I need for a flight, but a lot of it is just my backup to my brain, right? Just information that I've sent there, and I know it's safe, I know it's in the inbox, it won't go away, I can come back to it. Are we doing anything better there? So there are two parts here. One is if you've attended the other talk that we had yesterday around actions in inbox. So one of the things we're trying to make is make the inbox more alive, right? So for example, don't let the to-do list gather dust in the inbox, actually resurface it at a time that's most appropriate to you. The second part to it is, in fact, we just launched a new version of Google Now yesterday in the latest release of the client, and we have a feature called Reminders. And the idea is really simple. You should be able to tell Google, hey, remind me to call mom when I get home, and have that be surfaced as a Google Now card. And down the lane, we want to be able to actually use information again in your inbox because you told us that's important, and use that to again resurface as good actionable to-do list for you as in Google Now.
But it's sort of an ordeal to give myself that reminder.
Right, exactly. You shouldn't have to, and you want.
Right.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Right. I think. Last question.
Last
Make it
question.
good.
So I'm thinking about attachments. So a lot of us have attachments, text documents that have information that we want to look for. But the mail would just have an attachment, and there's no way I would need to figure out a good keyword to look for that mail. Remember who that person sent that mail to search for a keyword that's in the attachment. So is there work?
We don't have anything at this point, but I think that's one of the things we do see is that a lot of information is actually in these auxiliary parts of the email, and we should be able to actually surface. And the way to think about this is we just don't want the work to be in your head, and like make it easy for you to actually pretty much give us a few shorthands saying, okay, who is this from? What is this about? And then like we should do the hard
Just
work.
show some metadata that'll make it easier for a user to search for things.
So yeah, nothing yet, but definitely
Okay.
something we're thinking about.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're out of time, but again, we're in the sandbox area. Any questions, thoughts, ideas around new use cases, come talk to us. Thanks.